Hey everybody, Cody Menz here with a video on the upcoming, or if you're watching this, maybe released, Tier 8 Premium Russian Medium Tank, the TITT Rozanov. Not sure exactly how it's supposed to be pronounced, but in any event, as of the 1.22 update, this tank hasn't been released yet, but it seems like stat-wise, they're kind of finalized as far as the stats go for this tank, and it's ready for release along with essentially the model of the tank as well that you see here. Now, before we get into how this tank plays, is it going to be worth getting? Should you be excited for this? Basically, let's read what Wargaming has to say about it. Essentially, they're saying that the project was a self-taught engineer named Rozanov. No idea who that is. I probably should know, though, since I've been playing a tank game for about 13 years, but I don't. The fighting tank had a thick angled armor plates, and its suspension was protected by folding screens, and the main feature was the addition of driven battle rollers, which is what they're calling those two round objects on the front of the tank. Essentially, they were meant to protect the suspension from mines, incoming rounds, incoming fire, and if needed, they could actually be raised up like they're seen here. From my understanding, they're not going to be able to be raised up and down, within the battle. It's just they're set like that. Now, the sides of the tank are covered by these space armor screens as well, as you see there, which it looks like they were, I guess, meant to be able to be removed or adjusted, but they're essentially just angled in, on the model here. And essentially, some of his other ideas were included armor protection for tank-borne infantry, shell delivery system involving a chain-driven autoloader, and essentially his project here was canceled because they considered the battle rollers were not very effective. But in any event, it's an interesting tank to where Wargaming could bring this, as far as like a special event around this tank, or work it into, say, like an event like the Waffentrugger mode, loot boxes, something like that, holiday ops, or, like a direct sale at some point. I feel like this tank might not be coming soon, only because trying to sell something Russian right now probably is not the on the highest things for Wargaming EU, NA, stuff like that right now. But in any event, it's a pretty interesting tank, and who knows, maybe they will bring it sooner or later, because it's kind of been hanging in the game files for 2023 here. Before we get into the specific stats, so this tank it's got okay armor. It's one of these tanks where, so this is going off of 120mm gun, which is important because this tank has a overmatchable kind of turret. It's not cupola, but essentially a little thing sticking out of the roof, 35mm. So a lot of things are going to be able to pin this, because you have a lot of guns, 120mm, and higher, essentially tier 8 and up. So this thing does have that. Otherwise, if you can't overmatch it, it is pretty strong otherwise. But that's of note. You do have, so this is only against like 200mm, so like bumping it up a little bit, like we'll go with 250. The armor on this thing it's okay for a medium tank. It's decent, to where like these things do count as space armor, which is pretty nice. You do have obviously some weaknesses here because it is a medium tank. The armor is not like crazy thick, but it is angled pretty well. This little like driver area, it's a little bit less angled though, but you are going to be able to kind of angle this thing a little bit. And again, it's a medium tank, so it's not going to be perfect. Like heat rounds, like high pen rounds are going to still chew it up, but it does have some pretty good, with all the space armor on the side and the armor angles, and the turret's pretty small and, thick enough on the turret to where it's just overall pretty good. Your armor is gonna work really well against tier 6s, tier 7s, some tier 8s, unless they're shooting premium rounds at you, or shooting that top part, but nobody shoots premium rounds nowadays, so you should be pretty fine. But essentially this thing, the armor isn't going to be very good against tier 9s, you know, which is one of the reasons I feel like when they do release this isn't going to be, I guess, like it's going to be something where it's more of a, you might be able to get it cheap, or it might be bundled with something else, you know, in boxes, or some other way, or some event, because statistically, like, this thing, it seems okay, but it seems like one of those tanks where it's pretty good against tier 6s, 7s, 8s, but it's definitely going to struggle, you know, against tier 9s and 10s, because getting into the stats here a little bit, so it only does 200 damage a shot, which is pretty freaking low for a medium tank. It's close to the KPZ 7 here, which that tank's actually pretty good here, but some pretty key differences. So I threw in a couple other medium tanks here just for comparison sakes. Essentially though, 212 millimeters of basic pen, you have a premium APCR shell, 242, and your HE shell is pretty basic, nothing too crazy to see there. It does have a decent shell velocity though for a HE round, but you're essentially low damage, low pen, so it doesn't ruin it if you're looking at something like the KPZ 7, which is a pretty good tank. But getting down here, so 6 degrees of gun depression, not very good, so not great there. Accuracy is decent, like 0.33 is a pretty good value. You know, the Panther 2 beats it out, but compared to these other tanks here, it's pretty good. Aiming time, you know, it's okay. It's under 2 seconds, like that's good. On the move stats are actually worse, essentially, than what you would think. So it doesn't have good on the move values. So compared to say like a KPZ, you know, like a Panther and stuff like that, like you are going to, your gun's going to bloom. So bringing like a V stabilizer might be helpful on this. But that's of note, like compared to the closest tank gun wise, the KPZ, like this does have worse on the move values for moving your turret and hull and stuff like that. Now your DPM is pretty good, a little bit less than the KPZ, but better than your typical medium tank. You know, you have to have a bit of DPM because you only do 200 damage. You're going to be doing, you know, compared to some tanks at tier 8, like you're going to need 2, 3, you know, 4 is pushing it a little bit, but sometimes even 4 shots to basically do the same amount of damage as some other tanks. So that's definitely something to keep in mind with this. But the KPZ, that tank's really fast, shoots really, you know, like it works for that. So getting down to hit points, 1400 is not bad for a medium tank. It's actually pretty high. Like the Panther 2's at 1500. That's really high for a tier 8 medium. The TITT Rozanov here is on the upper range for a tier 8 medium, which is pretty good. Armor, I would consider it's above average for a tier 8 medium, but it's really dependent on what caliber gun's shooting you, because 120 millimeters can really, you know, damage you because it has that overmatch spot. Like all it has to do is basically connect on that and not actually, you know, worry too much about where it hits up there. Otherwise, this thing is pretty solid against low pen guns. Like there's not many readily available weak spots, especially if you angle a little bit. They have to focus on like the driver's port, or, you know, shoot premium at you. But nobody does that. In any event, getting to the mobility is the important part here about this tank. So this tank for a medium tank is actually pretty slow. So like compared to these tanks here, it's closest to the T-54 Mod 1 for the top speed, reverse speed. Like it's only 42 kilometers an hour forward, 16 backwards. That's slower than some heavy tanks. And the specific power is not very good either, and the hidden terrain resistance values are not good as well. So this tank is not very fast, and it also has a very slow traverse speed. Probably because of those battle rollers that they're calling them on the front of the tank. Maybe that has a hit to the mobility, but essentially this thing is slow for a medium. It's very slow. So that's, I feel like, the biggest negative of this tank so far, because whereas the gun's closest to like the KP7, albeit with less gun depression, the mobility on this tank is really going to hurt it. Where, sure, it's got some armor to kind of make up for that, but yeah, it's kind of weird. Armored medium tank with a high DPM, low damage gun. A little strange. Concealment, actually decent. You know, it's got okay camo. Granted, it's a medium tank, so the camo doesn't always play too much of a role, but at least it's not awful. And the V range at 390 is not bad. You know, it's just your typical V range at tier 8. Overall, this tank, so while I think, so statistically, I don't think we'll see any changes to it before release. It seems like it's pretty much finished from Wargaming's end. Honestly, they could probably buff it a little bit and it wouldn't be broken, but as of it, you know, right now, you know, at the end of August here in 2023, it looks like it'll be, I guess, a pretty interesting tank, but I don't think it's going to be something that you really need to, I guess, you know, fall head over heels for, unless it's some sort of event where you could get it, you know, like cheap, or, you know, for in-game currency, or it's bundled with something else, you know, stuff like that. But looking at like the historical reference that Wargaming has in here, it seems like they have some sort of plans to release it with some sort of event, or, you know, special game mode or something would be my guess. However, you know, with the current priority essentially being essentially EU and also the NA regions, that probably pushed things back a little bit here for this tank, but who knows, maybe they'll surprise us and it'll come out sooner rather than later. In any event, it's a pretty interesting tank in my opinion, where we don't have a tank with, you know, so-called battle rollers on the front of it. I'm all for that, you know, rather than them releasing, you know, just your typical overpowered tank, you know, that is basically just a better version of something we already have in the game. So it'll be fun when this comes out, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe it has a little excited. Maybe some of you guys in the comment section can tell me who the hell Rozanov is. So I have no idea. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in another one. Have a good one.